This show is based on the premise, the overall broadest premise would be that originally there's a unification, there's a unified world, then eventually there's a separation, and then thirdly, there's a reunification on a higher level, on a broader level. So I'm going to be drawing a couple of things here, a couple of sketches while I'm speaking. When we go to school, we're taught that there's billions and billions of galaxies in the world. Remember, this is in part cosmology, there's billions of stars and billions of planets inside each one of these galaxies. So there's billions and trillions and quadrillions and thousands of quadrillions of possibilities that there's other beings out there, right? But so we're made to feel like people are as insignificant as a grain of sand or a piece of dust floating in the wind. So we're made to feel insignificant in the world. But in contrast to that, I want to describe what was taught in certain educational centers in the ancient world. I'm not going back a million years, I'm only going to go back a few thousand years. So if you go back a few thousand years, there were educational institutions, and there were 7 principal ones. There was one in Athens, there was one at Ephesus at the Temple of Diana, which is now in Turkey. There was one in what was called Hibernia at the time, which is part of Western Ireland now, which was the most important one. But there were 7 principal ones. But there was one thing that they all had in common, that they taught that was in common. And that was that, let's say we're here, we're earthly humans here. And at a periphery, at a plane of infinity, there's a trinity, right? Now, this trinity had different forms. So in Egyptian times, it consisted of Isis, Osiris, and their son Horus. In Christian times, it was the Holy Trinity of Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And in between humans and this trinity, there were what eventually became known as the social hierarchies, and there were 9 of them. And we know them as everything from angels and archangels to cherubic beings and seraphim. There were 9 of them. So you have humans, you have Trinity, and you have 9 celestial hierarchies. And it was so important that people be taught that we evolve, that we raise ourselves correctly and properly and ethically. It was so critical. And the reason being that eventually earthly humanity would become the 10th hierarchy alongside the other 9, alongside angels and archangels and so on, all the way up to what's adjacent to the Trinity. So think how important it was, how important individual humans were in the past, in ancient times, at least the way it was taught in some schools, and how we look at individual humans today, right? We don't think of people as being that important anymore. So originally I said there was a unity, then there was a separation, and there's going to be a reunification as a third step, as a synthesis of the first 2. So I'm going to erase this, and I'm going to give you an example of something. This is easier when you're here live, because there's a lot of distractions when you're not here. So let's say, again, cosmologically speaking, right? We're here on Earth. Let's say this is the earthly world right here, right? And in the earthly world, our lives consist of 4 different parts. But the mineral part of us, when we die, our physical body dissolves. So here on Earth, it's the physical body that exists, and as a counterpart, when the body dies, it dissolves. It dissolves. So the second image, let's say in the realm of the sun instead of the realm of the Earth. Well, we know that the sun gives us life, and if you approach it too closely, it'll destroy your life. All right, as a counterpart to life. So as a counterpart to life, you have death. So on Earth, you have the dissolution of the physical body, but in the realm of the sun, you have life and death that are associated with it. Okay. As a third part, you have, let's say if we progress to the realm of the stars, the starry realm, what happens, right? If it's the physical body that exists and then dissolves on Earth, and if it's the life force or the body of formative forces that lives and dies in the realm of the sun, what happens in the realm of the stars? Well, if you think of it along these lines, it would follow that it's the psyche that is born in the realm of stars, the psyche, or what used to be called the soul, that's born in the realm of the stars. And as a counterpart to the birth of the soul, you have black holes. And where you have black holes, the soul goes to die, right? So let's say you want to move beyond the stars. Yeah, 1 here on Earth, 2 the realm of the sun, 3 the realm of stars. What happens beyond the stars, right? If you ask an astronomer like Tyson, if you ask a cosmologist, what happens beyond the stars, they'll tell you that well, there's more stars. Yes, but what's beyond more stars? Well, there's even more stars. But there's a point where you have to answer that question. What happens beyond the stars? Right? It would be a 4th realm. So I'm going to try to use a little geometry, but it's polar Euclidean geometry where you can figure this out. So the astronomer, the head of the Hagen Planetarium, he uses Euclidean geometry. Einstein used non-Euclidean geometry. He used the Riemann geometry, R-I-E-M-A-N-N. I'm going to try to use a polar Euclidean geometry or synthetic geometry to see if we can solve this problem. I'm going to erase the whole picture. I'm going to erase this. And I'm going to start another drawing. So let's say to do this experiment, let's say that we extend a straight line to infinity. Where does it go? Right? How can we figure out where a straight line, not a curved line, because the universe is not a bubble. It's not a humongous bubble anymore, not in polar Euclidean geometry. It's a plane. It's called a plane of infinity. At infinity, there's a plane. And the odd thing about this plane is that every side of this plane is the same side. I know that sounds paradoxical, but that's the way it is. So let's say we want to figure out where a straight line goes if you extend it to infinity. So we're going to draw a diagonal that crosses the straight line to infinity. And we're going to use a pivotal point so that this diagonal pivots around so that it touches at every point in this line, they intersect. The diagonal and the straight line intersect. So the diagonal is going to go this way. It's going to touch this line here. It's going to continue going around and touch this line here. Or at every point of the line, this diagonal is going to intersect with the straight line. Well, all you have to do is figure out that eventually this line that pivots is going to be parallel with this line, right? At this point, when these two lines are parallel, as the top line turns and this one remains constant, as the top line turns, eventually they're going to be both parallel to each other. At this point, both ends have reached infinity. Now, the very next step that this pivotal diagonal takes, right, the very next movement that this diagonal line makes, and it intersects this line again, this time from the other side. You see? So a straight line, I don't know if you can follow this, I hope so. A straight line that extends forever to infinity returns as a point from the other side. And this point has no, it's not subject to annihilation. The other three, in the realm of the earth, where the physical body exists and then disappears or turns to dust. In the realm of the sun, number 2, where life is born and life dies. In the third realm, the realm of stars, where the soul is born and as a counterpart dies in the realm of black holes. So there's always subject to annihilation. But the fourth part, this dot, this point that returns from the other side, it always returns from the other side. It is not subject to annihilation. So we can call that the spiritual point, which is constant. It is not subject to annihilation. It's always there. It's very faithful. It always comes back. All right? So I tried to describe the physical part, the life part, what used to be called the soul, and then finally the point, which is the spiritual point, the only point that is not subject to annihilation. Right? So I hope that was clear. I hope you follow me. And if you're following me, then stop following me or I'll have you arrested. All right. Sorry about that. Okay. We have a few minutes still. I'm going to try to do another example. And these are parallels to the work that's up in the show. I'm not trying to explain anything. This is not an explanation of anything. I'm just describing things that are parallel to my show. So since I only have a few minutes, I want to divide things into the solid, rocks, let's say rocks, plants, animals, and humans. Now imagine plants they go through a lifespan, they die, and given enough time and pressure, they become as solid as rocks. So plants can devolve into the mineral world, the rock world, but rocks can't evolve into plants, right? So there's always evolution works, but not evolution. From plants to rocks, there's evolution, but rocks can't evolve into plants, even for a second. That there's only humans, and humans devolve into the animal world. So you have then humans and animals. Because I know what Darwinism and so on. This is the reverse of Darwinism. First humans are there, and then animals, which are extruded from humans. But there's a difference here. So humans can devolve into animals in this little example, but animals can't evolve into humans. But there's a difference here. So where did humans come from? What devolved to become human, right? If humans devolved into animals, plants devolved into stones, what devolved to become human, right? It's like the old puzzle, if a shadow is a two-dimensional projection of a three-dimensional world, three-dimensional object, what's a projection that becomes a three-dimensional object? So here we have the riddle of what evolved to become human. And here there's a difference between the human world, the animal world, the plant world, and the stones or rocks. All those myths that we know about, where all these gods exist, and all these demigods, and where they, let's say they mix with human beings, and eventually human beings arise. So humans are a devolution of the gods in this instance, right? So gods devolve and become humans, but only humans can re-evolve and become gods. Just like that story that I told from the beginning, where in ancient times it was critical that human beings on Earth evolve ethically and properly and correctly, so that they can become a 10th hierarchy. So you understand the difference between humans, the human species. And each one of us, of course, is an individual species in a sense, which is different from the animal world, different from the plant world, and obviously different from the rock world, in that only humans devolve from something, but then evolve into something else. But I'm okay with time. Okay. I think I've spoken enough about this. You can find the original, there's a book, The Reflexive Universe by Arthur M. Young. There's books by Owen Barfield, Ernst Lehrs, Lehrs. There's the lectures by Dr. Steiner. And now, how do I know all this? How can I say that this is just nothing but dogmatism? Well, you have to experience this yourself, or else I'm just telling you something that anybody can just say and just try to get away with. So I'm gonna quote you an important line from a book titled "The Philosophy of Freedom," a very important book by Dr. Steiner, written in the 1890s. The last sentence of the preface of this book, The Philosophy of Freedom, says this: one must be able to confront an idea and experience it. Otherwise, one will fall into its bondage. We believe that we have the answers because of what Darwin tells us, Sigmund Freud, Albert Einstein. If you're a philosophy student, almost everybody follows the philosophy, the epistemology of Immanuel Kant, K-A-N-T, which all of these only give you a tiny little bit of reality. So the title of my show now is The Illusion That Light Travels. So that's another idea that people just take for granted, that light travels. And we say that, we formulate light travels, it travels at 186,282 miles a second in a vacuum, which doesn't exist in reality, and that the speed is a constant throughout the entire universe. An absurd extrapolation, since at the end of the universe, at the periphery of the universe, the properties are the reverse of what they are here on Earth, subject to earthly gravity. So you see how when we complain that somebody like Donald Trump gets into people's minds and people just repeat forever whatever he says. Well, in general, we repeat everything that we take for granted. What Darwin said, what psychologists say, like Sigmund Freud, Einstein, Immanuel Kant, and so on. And we just repeat it as if it were absolutely true. Yes, they're only true, but only as a detail of the whole. There's another quote by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, very important. The senses don't deceive, the judgment deceives. So when we see light apparently going from one place to another, we say light travels. But put yourself in the place of light, right? Become as light itself. I haven't smoked anything today, my head is not too tight or anything like that. Try to replace the light with yourself. Try to become as the light itself. You don't travel anywhere. You're everywhere all at once, because light as a whole is infinite as well as instantaneous. So that's how I came up with the title, The Illusion That Light Travels. Yes, light is affected by physical objects in the cosmos. Yes, we're limited as human beings by light and space, by time and space. But light, if you replace the light with yourself, you're everywhere all at once. Light, in that sense, doesn't travel. So that's part of where I got the title. And there are other things in this show that are reversed, as that triad: the see evil, hear evil, speak evil. That's a reversal of an expression that we're all acquainted with. So I think I gave you enough to think about for a day or two. So I'm going to end it here so that I don't overburden you with even more nonsense. So I'm going to stop right here. Thank you very much, and good night.